Hello and welcome to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the disturbing case of John Cremer Young. On Tuesday, August the 24th, 1965, the Akron Beacon Journal opened with the headline, Shaker Heights, Boy 8, Shot to Death. A shocking headline that rocked the residential community of Shaker Heights, Ohio, which just 2 years before had been described in Cosmopolitan as the closest thing to a utopian society that could be found anywhere in the US. The article went on to detail the crime. The body of 8-year-old John Cremer Young had been found in a wooded area in the suburb of Gates Mills. He was lying face down in long grass and had been shot once in the back of the head. John had left his home at around 9 a.m. that morning. His body was found by a young man who was walking his dog some 3 hours later. The body was found approximately 5 miles from where he lived on Warrington Road in Shaker Heights. Initially, there was little in the way of clues to solve this murder. The coroner confirmed that the bullet that was used to kill John was a .32 caliber of old vintage, but stressed that this did not necessarily mean that an old gun had been used to fire the bullet. It was clear that John had been shot at a different location and his body moved to the wooded area. There was no sign of a sexual assault and no other distinctive marks or injuries on the young boy's body. Powder marks on the back of the head indicated that he was shot at close range and most likely was unaware of the fatal shot before the trigger was pulled. The newspapers reported that John was a member of a socially prominent family. His maternal grandmother was a noted Cleveland architect and his father a respected chemical consultant. He was a happy child who lived with his parents and brother, Mackenzie, and sisters, Beth and Alice. Other children in the neighbourhood could recall seeing John at around 9:30 a.m. on the morning of his murder, and John's mother believed that her son would never go off with a stranger, so the police worked on the theory that John knew his murderer. It was reported in the press that the police believed that John had most likely been killed within a few hundred feet of his house, stating that they were convinced that the key to this whole killing is right in that neighbourhood. On the 26th of August, John was buried at Lakeview Cemetery with a memorial service being held at St. Paul Episcopal Church in Cleveland Heights. During these events, police made recordings of the people in attendance and took the guest signature books for examination. A house-to-house search was conducted and rubbish collected and sifted through in the hope of finding the murder weapon. A helicopter was brought in to aid with the search, and even the Boy Scouts were recruited to help in the Gates Mills area. A printed questionnaire was given to all local residents to complete, asking questions such as whether they were home on the morning of Tuesday the 24th, if they owned a .32 caliber revolver, and if so, would they give permission for it to be tested? Did they know John Cremer Young? Was he ever in their home? Did they see the boy at any point on the previous Tuesday? Did they have any theories on the killing? Once completed and signed, the questionnaires were taken to Shaker Heights Police Station to be studied by Lieutenant Ralph Shaw and Larry Doran, the chief of the Sheriff's Homicide Unit. As more evidence was gathered and leads followed up on, the information all started to point in one direction. The home of Robert and Marianne Colby, who lived just a couple of doors away from the Young family on Warrington Road. It came to light that Marianne had called the Young house on the morning of the murder and said that she had a jacket that belonged to John. The young boy left to collect it and was never seen alive again. On the 30th of August, Marianne voluntarily took a lie detector test during a police interview. The results indicated that she should be questioned again. On the 1st of September, a distraught Marianne made a statement to the police in which she told them that her 9-year-old son, Dane, was the one who had killed John. She described how Dane, who had learning difficulties, had killed John with a gun that she kept hidden in her home. She said that while she was in the dining room, she heard a shot from the hallway. She rushed to see what had happened and saw Dane with the revolver in his hand and John dead on the floor. She said she panicked and sent Dane upstairs before wrapping John in her coat and placing his body in her station wagon. She then drove to Gate Mills, where she laid John's body on the ground. Not knowing how to unload the revolver, she fired the remaining 4 cartridges into the ground. She then drove home, burned her coat and packed the revolver and a box of cartridges inside some ground meat, wrapped it in foil and placed it in the freezer where her husband wouldn't find it. She said that she did all of this in order to protect her only son. She then attempted to go on with her life as normal, even visiting the Young family who were mourning the loss of their child. Whilst it would appear that the case had been fully resolved, the police still had doubts over Marianne's version of events. These doubts were further justified when it was established that it was impossible for 9-year-old Dane to exert the 18 pounds of pressure required to pull the trigger of the revolver. The day after her first statement, Marianne made a second one. After breaking down during questioning, Marianne now said that she had accidentally killed John. For a reason which she could not explain, Marianne had loaded the gun that morning and put it on the kitchen counter under some laundry. She claimed that the gun had gone off accidentally as she stopped to pick up some laundry that she had just dropped. Marianne was charged with first-degree murder, indicating that the prosecutors felt that the crime was premeditated and not accidental, and held without bond. At a preliminary hearing, she pled innocent to the charges. In December 1965, Marianne's attorney filed a motion to ask for her to be transferred from County Jail to Hannah Pavilion Hospital for a 30-day psychiatric examination. The judge refused. When the case went to trial, Marianne pled both innocent and innocent by reason of insanity. She waived her right to a jury trial, and her fate would be decided by a 3-judge panel. The prosecution presented a compelling case. The bullet that struck John tore a large hole in the back of his head, and due to the powder burns around the wound, the coroner, Samuel Gerber, said that the gun was approximately 2 inches from the back of John's head when he was shot, disproving the claim that the gun had been accidentally fired when collecting the dropped laundry. They said that when Marianne had called on the morning of the murder to get John to collect his jacket, this demonstrated premeditation. Marianne was unable to explain why she had bought the gun a couple of years earlier under the name of Nancy Russell, nor why she had bought 50 rounds of ammunition, nor why she had chosen to load the gun for the first time on the morning that she had invited John to her house. Marianne's husband, Robert, did not know that she owned a gun, and the first he knew of Marianne's involvement was when he was driving home from work and heard on the radio that she had admitted that their son, Dane, had killed John. At the trial, the coroner confirmed that he had spoken to Marianne in the presence of her husband on the day that she had signed the statement blaming their son. Robert asked why Marianne had not told him, to which she replied that she didn't want to bother him and that she didn't want him to know that she still had a gun in the house. John's mother testified that the friendship between the two boys had led to personal disputes and friction between the two families, and John's father said that Marianne felt that he and his wife were not charitable towards Dane, and she was annoyed that they wouldn't let him stay at their house overnight. He went on to say that they encouraged their son to play with other children, and after a talk with Dane's dad, Robert, it was mutually decided the boys would not play together as much as they had. The judge ruled that Marianne's second confession, where she claimed the accidental shooting, was inadmissible as it had been obtained without her being allowed to consult with her attorney. The defence presented only 3 witnesses: a psychologist who testified that Marianne had psychosis, difficulty getting along with others, and abnormal feelings of superstition, distrust, and persecution. Dr. Rosenbaum claimed that Marianne was severely mentally ill, and Dr. Charles A. de Leon painted a picture of someone who was aggressive, sadistic, brutal and remorseless, stating that Marianne suffered from a severe psychosis that manifested itself in confused thinking. The doctor also testified that Marianne's husband, Robert, had told him that from the time John was shot until her arrest 9 days later, she was in a state of considerable sexual excitement, which further supported a psychotic diagnosis. All three stated that Marianne's mental condition had been deteriorating since 1952 and particularly in the preceding 4 years. However, the prosecution's psychiatrist, David Sprague, said that in the simplest terms of right and wrong, Marianne knew what she was doing on the day that John was killed. The judges deliberated for 5 hours before coming to a unanimous decision. As the verdict was about to be read, they had to clear the courtroom after a threat was called in of an impending incident should Marianne be found not guilty. As Marianne sat emotionless, the judges declared her innocent by reason of insanity and ordered her to be sent to Lima State Hospital for the criminally insane. After the trial, John's father stated that all we ever wanted was justice, and we are a little shocked. Both he and his wife had hoped for a verdict of first-degree murder with mercy, adding that they have to question the judicial procedures that tried her for her mental condition and not her crime. In a letter to the hospital, the judges stated that they felt that the possibility of Marianne being cured was poor and that she should not be released because it is not beyond possibility that she would kill again, adding that it would be a great mistake for this patient to be released from custody at any time that we would presently foresee. Less than 6 years later, Marianne was released from hospital with Dr. Theodore J. Rechetlow, the acting superintendent of Lima State Hospital, testifying at her sanity hearing that the hospital never considered she was insane. That concludes today's case. Please add any comments down below. Thank you for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. A book called The Insanity Defense covers the case and trial of Marianne Colby. Goodbye.